you know.
If you want to giggle, on the page for Unreal Engine, one of the things it says is to plan for it early. In their networking overview in the docs for it, the first header is plan for multiplayer early.
Really? Can you send me a link to this?
Now,
That's crazy. Yeah.
yeah,
Networking overview. The very first thing says plan early. So, yeah, we talked about network and how that's implemented into games. And Dodd and Stowe were bringing up a good point in that when you create netcode for a game, it needs to be built alongside the game in the sense that like take for instance like Russ brought this up, like phantom hits, and how checks are done on the side of checks are done on the side of just the host. Like, so basically how matchmaking in like Elden Ring and Dark Souls work is that both the host world is pulled as to what's happening on screen and the invaders world is pulled as to what's happening on screen, and there's basically like a consensus between the two that is then what translates into your game, what you see on screen. So that's how both of the game experiences can be pretty much, for the most part, similar to one another. In this game, it doesn't pull or check at all what the invader or co-op summon does. So that's why we're getting this incredibly bad desync and rubber banding on the side of the invader. The problems with this game's online mode stems from the fact that it's built on top of Unreal Engine 5, and I'd love to know the truth behind that. Oh, really? Okay. If you have any interesting information, Stowe, I'd be down to hop in a call. How you doing?
okay. Doing decent. So if you look at the actual networking stuff attached to Unreal Engine 5's documentation, they are telling you the truth that the only solution available on Unreal Engine is a host client situation. What do we mean by host and client? Is the first thing that we should discuss. The host owns all game state. The client gets told about game state, gets to send its local inputs to the host resolves that and sends it back. So what's happening on your screen as the client is essentially a simulation. You do not actually have a game state. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So the next step to understanding this, let's imagine that I'm playing a shooter and I am holding a gun, because this is the easiest way to imagine it. When I press the trigger, I am sending a packet to the host that says I have pressed the trigger. On the host side, it says, okay, I am now spawning a bullet. Then that bullet gets sent to all the other clients and back to you, and now you have a bullet. So
Okay.
only your inputs are getting sent around. You're getting copies of game state. So when I press roll, it goes to the host, it resolves the roll, and plays back what is going to occur on my screen. The problem with hit registration is if the host swings, they need to wait to know about my inputs before resolving the results of that swing, because the host owns all of the game state. It's only essentially taking feedback of my buttons. It isn't pulling my version of the game, because the client's version of the game fundamentally doesn't exist. So if you want to resolve this, you need to decouple your engine representation a little bit. You would put a swing into a queue, and then you would be looking for inputs from the player, the client, to see if they had done anything that would change the resolution of your event. But by default, it is not going to do that. This is good for shooters, because in a shooty game, the amount of inputs that you do are relatively kind of low in terms of changing game state. You're spawning bullets and you're running around. You don't have a full world, and you're not in animations very long in a shooter. When you're playing Souls, when you swing your weapon, you're in frames for multiple seconds. There's more persistent game state that has to be resolved compared to bullet whizzing through the sky. So there is a lag time that you have to take into account if you're going to treat the client's buttons as being equally valid to the host's button.
So in the document, so it says that it can, like, there's no possible way that it can also pull from the client.
You just don't have a fully formed game state on the
Okay.
client side is the thing that you need to be aware of. Whenever
Okay.
you are pressing buttons or doing deltas to your game state, that is getting sent to the host to resolve, and then you're getting an updated version of it. So there is an inherent latency to what you are seeing on your side versus what is actually occurring.
Um. So, but like it. So in the docs, it says that that system. I guess what I'm having like a hard time wrapping my mind around is what about the Unreal Engine 5
This is
engine?
just the architecture that is provided through the engine. This is
Okay.
what they do.
So, but something could be built on top of that, possibly.
So you'd have to build your own to do this sort of resolution. Generally speaking, a solution to this is that you essentially play back. Okay, so when you're running an engine, you can tie your game to the frame rate. So every tick of a frame is an update to the engine. Or you can have the engine underlying doing stuff and then it just renders at a certain rate. So these are two different ways of viewing the way that you run your video game. Every frame is a moment, or there's an underlying engine going on that simply renders at a certain cadence. If you shoved player actions into essentially an event queue, and then we're checking to see what buttons the other player played by timestamping them, and then resolved, there might be a solution there. I don't know how they've implemented their game.
Mm.
But if they are doing an update where a player's event as host just happens, this is not fixable.
Improvable.
It's a latency issue, right? With the example with the bullet, I press the button on my screen, it gets sent to the host. The host says bullets now exist, sends me back a packet that tells me that I have a bullet. That latency is what you have to resolve to be able to get peer to peer out of this system. It is not peer to peer. So if your game, the advantage of peer to peer is that I swing, I send you packets that I'm swinging. I look at my fully realized game state. My game state says I'm in iframes. I send back a packet to you that says, no, you didn't hit me, and then we move along. The problem is that there's only one game state, and every client is inherently lagging behind that game state. Doesn't matter in shooters because bullets fast. If you shoot a bullet a half, like 2 ms later than you thought you did, it's still going to end up in the same general location and game state. But for things that are slower that you have to resolve over multiple frames, issues.
Gotcha.
So the default out of the box netcode that Unreal Engine 5 supports, you have to build your game around this. You have to build your game around this idea that you're not going to auto resolve on game state.
So is your belief, given what you know now, that this game wasn't originally designed with any type of online intended? It was something that was kind of just added because it could
I
be.
don't either. They didn't know the consequences of their decisions of choosing Unreal Engine when they did this, or they tested this stuff on two machines right next to each other.
Mm.
And you're right, Wimpy. This is not great. It's most games have moved on from this type of architecture. They do some flavor of both hit scan and actual physics for bullets to handle this stuff. There's a lot of research that's been done into that. Unless they have to build. So the answer to your question is they have to build their own event resolution system. It is not native to the game. That is not going to happen quickly.
What do you think? Like, so I kind of throw like the arbitrary number of, like, maybe they wanted to, like if it was even possible, just hypothetically, like they wanted to move on to like dedicated servers or something, like to build something like that to interact with the game. Like I threw out the arbitrary number of like a year or something like that. Like if a dream team came in, like how fast do you think someone could do that? Obviously, I'm not expecting in any way, shape, or form that that's going to happen or will happen at all. But let's say like best case scenario, what do you think we're looking at?
So, how is a new dev studio going to afford servers that are supposed to cover? This
Well,
game got released everywhere, right?
so yeah, but it's Hexworks is like the developers, right? But
Right.
their parent company is CIGames. Let me look.
If they have a ping filter, they have localized servers so that people only connect where that is reasonable. They still have to build the architecture so that the server is the one maintaining all of the resolution. They still need to write resolution code. That's what's not inherently in the engine at the moment. That's what's missing. Even if they got dedicated servers and everyone's just attaching to a game state on the server, there's still going to be that latency issue. Yeah. So I don't think dedicated servers are going to happen. And it's what I'm describing is a fundamental engine change, which I don't even know if Unreal can support, because you need to defer the resolution of events. Because this would have to apply in basic PvE as well. It's yeah. You'd have to have some form of delay, and they haven't built their animations around that type of delay. So like if this was Dark Souls 1, when you press a button, you're in frames for fucking ever, right? So the actual resolution of your button presses can take a certain amount of time, and you can sort of lag you can lag the game engine slightly behind player inputs by a bit, and it doesn't really change the game feel. Just as an example. But I don't think they're gonna do an engine overhaul for this.
Yeah, it seems like given everything we know, that like I was already thinking that it was like out of the question to begin with, and that was the hopeful me saying that.
Yeah.
But now
they might wizard
this,
something out. But I don't expect it to happen within 3 weeks, which is the only period of time in which this matters.
Well, that's unfortunate.
Wimpy is right. There's this. So rollback essentially sits there and says we're just going to sort of predict what's going on because the inputs are sparse and we know what's likely to happen. And then if something goes awry, we just roll back and fix it. That's the concept of rollback netcode. But you have to build your game from the ground up to be able to do rollback.
Gosh,
rollback you can't just take an existing fighting game and go, I want rollback. The Killer Instinct devs did a little part of their documentary where they talked about how long it took them to take their game and implement rollback. So a fighting game where the actual solution for the netcode is known, it still took them a while to get that solution up and running.
And do you know roughly like what that? Because that's also a fighting game, which is a wildly smaller game, right?
It's a lot more constrained in terms of what the engine needs to do. I don't remember that. You can probably find the YouTube video where they're talking about the rollback netcode implementation if you're interested. It's still an interesting thing to watch, and they described it in work hours, not time, which is sort of dev speak because how many hours of time people put in doesn't necessarily correspond to days of the week.
True.
But I don't expect this to be fixed in 3 weeks, if it is going to be fixed at all.
Yeah, in Steele's interview with the dev, so apparently they did that like podcast whatever interview like I don't know, probably like last week, 2 weeks ago, something like that. And in that interview, they said, yeah, this is the top of our list.
Great.
Bar none of things. Yeah, right. Where I'm going with that is it seems like this has been on their minds for at least a month.
Here's my perspective on it. I can find documentation on Unreal Engine 5 by simply going to Unreal 5's documentation and seeing what they provide. This should have been foreseeable on engine choice. If they were
So
designing a game that was going to have an online component, the consequences of this choice is right there in the docs from the get-go. If it's their top priority, groovy. If this is a fundamental engine problem, like what they said in this interview, why wasn't this communicated at any point during anything?
So they did talk about that. There's a lot of weird stuff around that, right? They said that they want to keep the lines of communication open. And I know it was suggested to maybe even do like a roadmap and tell people like, hey, this is our expected date that we're gonna try to have X, Y, and Z fixed, buffered out, or whatever. Stuff like that would help with like any messaging would just help. Instead of just complete radio silence. So apparently they were advised from both Steve and Jill and probably other people as well. I think Cowboy as well, like to be like, don't release this game in its current online state. Like let it, give it some time and then add it later. Apparently they were saying like they should do that. And apparently there were also devs that said like, yeah, it's probably a good idea. But someone was like, nope, we just gotta we have to ship it. Yeah, we have to ship it with what we promised. And I'm wondering if that decision to just, ship it anyways, despite being told not to, there's maybe some belief that they knew that there's fuck all to be done. So it's like since it's not going to get better, you're just going to have to get what you get,
Yeah. So I don't work for their company. I don't know what their internals are.
I'm guessing here.
I am a software engineer. I write code for a living. I deal with things like latency and travel time and this sort of stuff when I do my work. It's not my focus, but it exists. In my company office, there are two versions of Wi-Fi. There is the Wi-Fi you use for work, and then there is the Wi-Fi that approximates shit signals so that you can see how your stuff works when you're not in a first world country.
Interesting.
We have network, and we have ways of approximating latency and packet loss and all of that stuff. We test our code underneath those conditions so that we know what is going to happen. I don't know what their work situation looks like, but due diligence suggests that this wasn't a shocker. I don't work at their office. I don't know how they do things. I'm giving an example of somebody who works in an industry where this matters, and we do that.
Yeah. And I want to let everyone know watching it, like, the goal is to not shit on the developers. We don't know what their situation was. We're just kind of connecting the dots here, or trying to, right, with what we have, and just making sense of it all,
Yep. If you want to giggle, on the page for Unreal Engine, one of the things it says is to plan for it early. In their networking overview in the docs for it, the first header is plan for multiplayer early.
Really? Can you send me a link to this?
Yep. I'll just drop it right in chat.
Okay.
Now,
that's crazy. Yeah.
Yep.
Networking overview. The very first thing says plan early in client server model. Okay. Wow.
Yep. So.
Oh, wow. Oh, man.
So.
Boy, howdy.
So I find it hard that they didn't know. I will never blame devs for this sort of decision. Devs are overworked, underpaid, and they want their product to be good.
Yeah, 100%.
I will blame.
Like, no one wants to make a pile of shit, right?
Right.
It's never
no one
on
wants
their
to
shoulders.
Do that. And I know from experience that getting something out is the process of 1,001 compromises that suck every step of the way to make. You have some wonderful idea, and reality hits, and you have to keep cutting away at it, and you hope that the product that comes out at the end looks like what you were dreaming of at the start, but you usually can't look at it because you've seen every compromise you've had to make. It sucks to be a dev. The folks in the business folks are people that I would not be happy with.
Yeah, for sure. I think Ovion's right in saying that. I mean that seems to be like the biggest issue that plagues a lot of gaming. I thought it was a really interesting conversation. We were talking about games that should be considered for Game of the Year for 2023, and apparently like there was some other devs that were like maybe pissed, maybe not pissed. I don't know the exact quotes or anything like that, but basically some devs were talking about Baldur's Gate 3, and that one of the reasons why Baldur's Gate 3 was able to be so great was because they were building that thing like apparently Larian, right? The people that made that,
Yep.
like weren't constrained to like, you know, investors telling them what to do. So they were able to take their time and do what needed to be done to make it in a state that they like. Whereas
It was also very risky.
Probably, but yeah. So that was another thing that I was bringing up last time I was talking about this, was that like the reason that people were kind of like rolling their eyes at this, because they're like, well, they don't have to deal what we have to deal with, whereas like we're getting like deadlines and all that shit breathed down, you know, our necks, and yeah, like what you said with it being risky is that they just do not have to like if that thing was a flop, that would have probably very well been like the end of that studio, right?
They would not recoup their losses on that. It's expensive. Investing in engines is expensive, and doing long-term stuff is expensive. Remember, DS2 was built on its own engine, and it didn't do great. FromSoft went backwards. All the time they spent on that engine is just lost money. It is terrifying to make those types of investments. Larian already had a pretty good backbone from doing Divinity Original Sin 2, but long-term horizons are terrifying. That type of investment without direct returns is a nightmare. There's a reason why suits exist.
That was one thing I chatted about, is like to me in my head there's really two investment models. So you have what we've come accustomed to in a lot of games, which is game developer says we can do this, and this, and then investors say, okay, well, we'll fund it, you know, with the gamble that it will pay off and that they will bring to life what they need and they'll get their money back. You can invest in the dream short term in like a game by game basis, or you can invest in the long term of a company. So I feel like that's why, you know, companies like Bethesda or even FromSoft at this point can probably function really well, is because it's like, okay, we have this tentpole project, this IP that's probably going to do good regardless. Like same thing with like Call of Duty, right? It's like Call of Duty can continue making shit games because they know, okay, it's big enough. We'll just, you know, we could just keep pumping out because people like the IP, right?
Yep.
So
Something
you can
has to be
just
a risk
throw
bearer.
you can just throw enough money as you want at it because you know you're going to get the return on the investment. Whereas like with what they're doing with Lords of the Fallen, you don't know. It has to be a gamble as an investor.
Yeah, there's a reason why. You know how like Facebook decided it wanted to do VR, right?
Yeah.
It could do that because Facebook is a massive ad platform. It could make that decision and spend that money on investing in these technologies because it had something that was always going to pay the bills. Small studios don't have that. They do not have any sort of nest egg or any protection. They are one bad game away from not existing or being bought up. Y'all are frustrated with the Soul series. I know it. Most of you have talked about the netcode and everything. From Software has had to have overlapping dev cycles to push games out since forever. They didn't have a super hit series. Armored Core sold okay. Miyazaki did Armored Core 4 and then got handed Demon Souls. Somebody else got handed Armored Core 5, which didn't go well while he was doing Dark Souls 1. Someone else got handed Dark Souls 2 while he started doing Bloodborne. And then during Bloodborne, they were working on DS3. And during DS3, they were working on on Sekiro, and during Sekiro they were working on Elden Ring, and during Elden Ring they were working on Armored Core. They have to keep doing that to survive. The reason why From Software hasn't fixed a number of things is because they have to keep using the same stuff over and over again to be able to keep going. It's a horror show. Being a dev sucks. I've worked on projects that got cratered that were fucking brilliant. That I was so proud of what I was able to do with them and the contributions I made, and they've never seen the light of day. I have no property rights to because I signed it away, because that's what happens when you're a software engineer, and it's just gone. It sucks to be a dev. Don't blame them. Blame management. It is always management.
Damn.
Sucks, and I hate to show you the networking overview page, but this is, unless there is a way to hack through this, you're done.
Well,
I don't know. I might have some laughs with this because if the netcode is as bad as it is, trying to challenge run this in co-op is going to be a fucking nightmare, and I will never stop laughing. I just need to find a victim to do it with me.
I'd love to see JM and you do it.
Oh, JM would be having a fucking fit. It would be great.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I guess I'll roll on with the stream and the fun enjoyment that I'm gonna have. But I don't know if you had any final thoughts.
No. Final thoughts. Monster Hunter Rise has a good netcode. It has just a lot of good bosses and a lot more content. Play Monster Hunter.
Okay. I will definitely. Todd's going crazy.
Yep.
I will definitely take that into account.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for hopping in your Stowe. Seriously, that was. Yeah. Oh,
all right.
Gosh.
See ya.
See ya. Thank you.